And welcome to Inside the Pressure Cooker, where cooks and chefs share their stories of life inside the kitchen.
Yoga is sort of like cooking in the sense that when you're really with it and you're like one with it, it's this dance and you can really go inward and find your own inner innate wisdom and just be with it and be with it's like that mind body connection that you find in cooking, you also find in yoga. And it started out very much as a physical thing for me. I think a lot of people it starts that way. Like I said, I was always really active and God knows my body needed it. And I just really got into it. But through 2020 and up till now, I've really, really discovered the spiritual side of it. It helped me find a bigger sense of purpose at a time when I needed it. And that can sound silly to someone who's like, isn't it just like contorting your body in weird shapes? But it's really not if you're in the practice, you know? Kind of like how cooking is like, aren't you just throwing ingredients in a skillet? Yeah, sure. Or you're learning and you're exploring and you're getting curious and you're mindful and you're present, you're using all your senses. It's the same thing.
So I had the great privilege of working with Suki when we opened the Meddlesome Moth in Dallas in 2010 to some pretty critical acclaim. And the restaurant just hit it from the beginning. And let me tell you, we had some very long ass kicking days for a long time. So it was great having her on our team. Loved working with her, and she went on to have a very successful career from there. Working with the same group for a while, Mud Hen definitely was one of those restaurants that was fit for her. Like she mentions later on in this podcast, it's hard to tell if it was created for her or if she just became more of it. But we had a great talk and conversation about restaurants and the mental health side of things on how we can, as chefs, be consumed by the restaurant um, and so involved in it. And it's such a passion that you get lost in it, right? So when you kind of get lost in it, you're you become part of it, and it's hard to tell where the restaurant ends and the person begins, and vice versa. And it was, and you think you're controlling it, and then you're done. It consumed you. There's nothing left for it to get from you. So it pretty much chews you up and spits you out, and to start over. Hopefully, you're listening to this and learning from this, and taking away something that will help you not be as consumed by the restaurants as I once was. I lied about it and said, it's a passion, which it was. But I was almost in denial on how much I was consumed by what I was doing. But I also truly loved it. So it's really hard to tell where that line in the sand is. But the beautiful thing about it is finding your purpose both in life, inside the restaurant and outside the restaurant. And then if you do happen to be consumed so much by that restaurant or the restaurant industry and you just get spit out, it's about finding your purpose again and bouncing back up and not being defeated by it. So enjoy the rest of this conversation. And please, if you haven't already, go to Instagram and look up 4 Dimensions Wellness. It's all spelled out, FOUR Dimensions Wellness. And then her website is 4dimensionretreat.com. Definitely something to look into. Don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect your body, your mind, or your soul. Enjoy this conversation. All right, here we are. Suki, thank you so much for joining us. Give me a quick elevator pitch, 30 seconds. Who is Chef Suki?
That is the question I've been asking myself, I think, as I've started this journey, kind of evolving. So I was in the restaurant industry for a, a while, enough to know that I needed change, but enough to develop a lot of experience. So I worked at various restaurants across Dallas and gained a lot of experience and then was ready for change. So in 2020, I left the service industry and found retreats. And knowing that I needed something food adjacent, like food is my passion, and that's what I want to do. So I became a chef of retreats, which then led me to learning to teach yoga and sort of developing my own business. So it's been quite a process.
Definitely. So, I mean, what got you into cooking to begin with?
That's such a funny thing. Like my dad always says like, "Were you just up late one night eating bonbons, getting stoned, and you like saw a culinary school commercial or something?" Like, because it just sparked out of nowhere. But once I decided I wanted to do it, I was just driven. So I was working. I had always kind of been in the like food industry. I worked at an ice cream shop and worked at various places in high school, and then I was like really getting into it and wanted to expand on it. So I was working at a cake shop with a bunch of gals that were going to culinary school, and it just inspired me. Like I wanted to do what they were doing, and so luckily I had the support of my parents to go through that process, and it was a foot in the door for me. So I went for pastry, and then that
Right.
really evolved into everything. Once I got into my externship out of culinary school, I was working at Uchi in Austin, and had the opportunity to touch a lot of ingredients I'd never seen before, and that passion just exploded. And from there,
So, would Uchi be the place then you think that you knew that you had made the right choice?
yeah, it terrified me. Honestly, I was so in over my head, and I that little culinary certificate made me think I was something, like I was hot shit, and gave me the confidence to walk in that building. And I was like, oh my God, I know nothing. I have so much to learn. I want to learn it all. So,
Yeah, no, it's funny how much you can go through with culinary school, and it opens up your mind in so many ways, and all these doors open up, and you're just like, hell yeah, and you're excited, and you're like, I got this, and you walk in on your first day, and you're like, I'm a fucking idiot.
yes. Oh my God, I know nothing. Like in culinary school, you're in this container that you feel like you know it all, even though I was still super in over my head. In culinary school, it's a lot to take in. It's a whole new language, a
Hmm.
new way of life. Like, it's a lot. I was like 17 years old, wide eyed, thinking I was going to do it all.
Oh wow, so you were only 17 when you started then?
I think I was like 17 or 18. I graduated high school early. So
Okay,
I was ahead. Maybe I was 18 going on 19. I honestly can't remember, but I know I now
that's still pretty
felt
young for a lot of
young.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, like just felt super young. And that allowed me to progress in my career at a young age too, you know.
I get that. So you're down in Austin for a while. You ended up in Dallas, um, and you kind of made your name with Mud Hen. Kind of tell us a little bit about that. I mean,
Yeah, Mudhen came into my space at the right time for me. Like I had um, kind of polished my skill enough that I felt super ready. Like I had kind of worked to build my skill set, I guess, in a way, um,
hmm
and was ready for. I had been with corporate for a while, and my passion was calling. My creative juice was flowing and needing an outlet, and it just kind of came about in a way that I'm so grateful for. I can't even tell you. Like Mud Hen just felt like me. It felt like, I mean, it was so many things. It was a space for me to learn, to grow, to express myself. It was me on a plate. Like I I loved that project a
so
lot.
tell us a little bit more about Mud Hen. I mean,
So
yeah,
it
I mean,
was
tell us more about it. Like, what is it,
what is I know, right?
or
Oh my
was it?
God. Yeah. I talk about it like everybody knows what it is because I feel like everybody should. It was a healthful, the buzzword farm to table, concept in the farmers market in Dallas. Um, we were sort of ahead of our time. I think that's kind of what we were up against and why we ultimately didn't survive is that we were a huge space in an area that had not been quite developed yet. Um, and we, gave it our all for the time that we did, but it was all about healthful food that was good at affordable, sustainable prices. I wanted it to be, we wanted it to be um, attainable. Let me think of the word I want to say, like accessible. We wanted it to be
Sure.
accessible because quality food should be. Like I think in particular in Dallas, there's such a push to like be something big and be on the map and all of that food kind of has evolved away from just being a way to survive. you know, like we all have to eat and we
Right.
all have to eat well, and that can sometimes feel really challenging. And so, our goal was just to have honest, good food that was accessible.
Yeah, Dallas in general has always kind of been more about God, the entertainment value of eating, and like what's trending now
Yes,
than
gold flakes
than
and bone
anything.
dust and people like pretending to like things they don't like for the sake of trendiness. Like, give me the real food.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I feel bad for people that jump on that trend because once that next place opens up, you go from being like the hot place and you're packed and restaurants making money to you're empty and closed in 6 months
Yes.
because you're just no longer relevant.
Yep. That's exactly how it felt. Like when it got hard, we were left in the cold. There's not like in Austin, there's this keep Austin weird, support local, and they mean that. Like there's a support of local businesses. And in Dallas, it's just sort of on to the next thing, especially if you're not, we were kind of outside of so many people's zone, literally, um, right outside of
Yep.
people's zone. And so, yeah, you just can't survive that way. If you're not the neighborhood spot or the next best thing.
Yeah. No, I mean it was a cool little space. You're right though. It was the farmers market in Dallas is it's just outside of everybody's touch apparently. I mean it's definitely a lot more developed now. Um, but it's taken a little bit.
Yeah, it has. It really has. And you're right. It's
Um,
expanded a little bit. And, you know, sometimes you're just too early. Like the irony that we closed at the end of 2019 and then 2020 happened was such a kick in the teeth because I was executing Mud Hen food at my next restaurant and I was like, man, this is when Mud Hen would have thrived. I mean, people were just looking to be nourished. And that's what we did was just give you honest kind of like diner grandma style but healthful food. And like we would have thrived.
so Medhen,
Yes.
it was kind of who Suki was. It was almost created for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. It felt like that. I honestly, because of when I joined the project, so I joined it in pre-opening development. What ended up being, it was supposed to be 6 months to a year or around that time, but you know how that goes. So it was about 2 years at a time. And so I don't know if I evolved alongside the project, if the project evolved alongside me, or if we kind of became it. I don't know. But you know how that goes. Like when you get really passionate and really driven by something, like it became an obsession. It felt like it was me.
I mean, it's cool, it's beautiful in the same time, and yeah, I get it. Where it just it's um yeah, I
Consuming.
mean, yeah, well, they just become so yeah, I mean, consuming is that's that's almost an understatement in many ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I mean, it's the best way to describe it, but I don't think chefs and others in this industry will understand, but anybody else outside will not. Um,
There's no way to describe it.
uh-uh.
That's the most messed up part. Is like even when you're on the outside as a young chef, you almost have a hunger for it. in a way that, like, if it was described to you, for me, if it was described, I'd want more. Like you're like, yeah, that's twisted. Sign me up. Like, you just have this drive for it's that creative side that's, I don't know, for me, a little chaos demon.
Yeah, and I mean I mean because all of a sudden it's like you're opening up Pandora's box too.
Hmm.
And it's just the whole all of the amounts of chaos and the crazy and the creative just all comes out. Um and you I mean it becomes consuming where I mean you are that restaurant. And then the hard part with that though is feedback, criticism, and in some degrees failure are hard to not take personally. Would you agree
Amen.
with that?
I
Yeah.
absolutely. And nothing can prepare you for it either.
Mm-mm.
That was, that's what's crazy making, is it all for me like became such crashing cymbals, as it was all like crescendoing to an end. And yet I was so a part of the storm. I became the storm, that it was like, whoa, it all just kind of settled. And I was left with this rubble to dig through and assess in a world where I was used to just being on to the next thing, on to the next menu, on to the next event. Like, that's what you do, is like, just keep going. Okay, next show must go on.
Yep. No, it's just when you go from that creative element and everything's just vibing, if you will, to then just standing at the bottom of it all, just wondering kind of like, what did I do? Like how,
What did I do? And it's such a sense of rejection for me, of like,
yeah.
when you crack yourself open and put yourself all the way out there and give everything you have to make it work, like that hustling, scrambling, scrapping, like hoping you can make it work because you're holding on for dear life in every way, that you're like, y'all really didn't like me. And it's not about you, but it feels like it's about you.
Yeah. And as much as you want to tell yourself that it's not a personal thing, it's impossible to not take it that way.
Right. That's the dissonance. That's the like really crazy making thing, is you have to tell yourself it's not about you, but if you did it right, it sort of is. Like, if you put your all into a project and give everything, like, okay, it sort of feels like it's about me.
Yep. No, and honestly, I think a lot of that is where chef egos come from, where I've always, well, I shouldn't say always, but towards the end of my career, my philosophy on a chef ego was it really wasn't necessarily ego. For some, yeah, it is, but I think for others, that ego was more of a protective measure, like a barrier or a shield that you would put up to prevent yourself from being hurt by some of that feedback.
Totally. Yeah, you have to act like you're the biggest one in the room when,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, all those chefs and those
gosh.
egos that are, pumping their chest up, and you're just like, "Dude, why are you such a douche?" Well, at home they probably go home and cry in the corner at night,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
it's like a survival skill that
Yeah.
definitely is an interesting perspective. Yeah, because you're being told by guests and owners and all this audience that you're putting yourself out there for, like, not good enough, try again. So you do have to develop an ego, like, no, like,
Yeah. You don't know what you're talking about.
when
Fuck
really you're
you.
like, oh, I am a piece of shit.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think for some that's kind of where their ego comes from. I think others, I think it's just I think they really are that egocentric. So,
I think
um,
that can happen. Like, you're little in a big world, you know?
yeah.
You have to pretend to be big at least. But Dallas kind of does that. It's so competitive. Like,
Mhm.
you see these little pockets of community. Um, but it can be really like cutthroat and not welcoming, I find. I hate to say that, but it can feel that way, you know?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, especially there's just the little different pockets of chefs. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, or if it was like the clients.
No pockets of
Um,
chefs. I think
yeah,
it's, yeah.
yep, yes, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I kind of avoided those because I didn't want to be. Uh, it's not that I didn't want to be included, but it didn't feel natural for me.
Same. I was like, I just wanted to do the work to do the work, because I was passionate about that
Yeah.
and my team and like kind of my bubble. I never got into the clickiness side of it, and I
Hmm.
think there's maybe opportunity there and connection there and maybe even support. But yeah, I just never got into that part.
It's funny how the chefs have their own little cliques, and um, but that makes sense. I mean,
Hmm.
it's kind of their own community, but
Well, yeah, we live a different life. We speak a different language. Like we all want to be surrounded with like-minded people that get it,
hmm.
you know.
No, I get that. So, Mudhen, healthy, inclusive, not exclusive, um, but not healthy being like the trendy negative term where it was what I would say a very approachable restaurant where it was you could eat healthy without feeling like you were eating healthy.
Yes, that was the exact goal. Like, kind of like you trick kids into eating vegetables. Like, hey, did you know these are vegetables? Like that kind of thing where I wanted to introduce people to interesting ingredients in interesting ways that just kind of gave new perspective,
Hmm.
and that also, again, was affordable because sometimes if it doesn't feel attainable or within reach, then weird is just weird.
Now, did
Um,
you always eat that way, or is that something you trained yourself for this restaurant?
Kind of both. I am a healthful and wellness person. Like into I've always been active and like into fitness and things like that. But it definitely sparked a passion, and then I got to work with a couple nutritionists in the pre-opening development and a dietitian, and so that really like spoke to the nerd side of my brain in a way that I really wanted to learn about it and became super passionate. So that's when I say, like, I don't know if I developed alongside Mudhen or if Mudhen developed alongside me because,
Sure.
yeah, I definitely went all in on it and was buying in on what we were doing, that it was just good food.
Yeah, no, and I love how you refer to like that nerd side of you because there's always that one topic, or at least one that every chef has that he just totally or she just totally just geeks out on.
Yeah.
Um, and so for you, it was working with a nutritionalist and dietitian.
Yeah, like understanding food, um, I think I went into it knowing flavors and understanding cuisines, but understanding food and how it relates to the body is something that really sparks my interest. Like how we use it, how we it fuels us. Um, nourishment as a whole is fascinating to me. That food can be medicine if you use it correctly. Like
Absolutely.
the whole chicken
Um,
soup for the soul thing is real.
um, no, you know what? Someone sent me a book. My aunt did, and I'm trying to remember what it is. It is. Oh, Cleanse to Heal.
Cleanse to heal.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's essentially like a liver detox book. I mean, and it's thick and it talks a lot about um, just essentially cleansing the body, but it's all about, I mean, you're ridding yourself of salts, sugar, I mean, salt. You're not allowed to use salt in this one. Any salt,
Whoa.
any fats. And it's all about using organic produce. You get rid of, in the beginning, all proteins as well. And so it's just about all the recipes and everything is It starts with like celery juice every day. I haven't actually tried to follow it. Is being the father of two young kids, and I know my wife doesn't want to follow it. It would be impossible for us to do it, but
Oh my
it,
gosh. Just
it's an
imagine
interesting.
the whole family's eating, whatever you make them, and then you're with your celery juice.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah,
I'm sitting there just like, my kids, what's for
cleansing.
breakfast? Hey, it's celery juice again for breakfast, kids. Yeah,
Oh
that's gonna go
God.
over real well.
But they say that works. Like there are things that we could be doing from
Hmm.
nature that they say is, incredible for you. Simple ways. Like celery juice can create all this detox, all this rejuvenation in your body, and that's available to us.
Yeah,
And yet we like do these detoxes and all this, all this kind of product and overproduced stuff. Like that's what I'm talking about is like food is medicine, and yet we're like ordering the next tea or whatever.
yeah. I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit offline, but was there a book that you ever referenced, or whether it's when working with the dietitians or nutritionists that for learning some of this?
It was kind of layered. So there was, well, nourished broths. I think that's what it's called. There's a broth book. I think it's called Nourished Broths that really talked a lot about the value of bone broth. And I loved that one. Like it really, we served bone broth at Mud Hen, and
Hmm.
it's so good for you. Like again, the chicken soup for the soul thing. It's regenerating of your gut. It helps with inflammation, helps with collagen. Like it's a good way to start your morning. There's so much about bone broth that's really great for you, great for your immunity. Um, and then this one called Thug Kitchen
Oh
that
yes.
sounds so silly, but it was really fun. It's just playfully written. It's got some colorful language and great pictures. And then it's some interesting ingredients, and it's a vegan cookbook
Yep.
with interesting ingredients. And that's what I liked about it. So, Mud Hen, we tried to do plant forward, vegan friendly. Um, I think vegan can sometimes be taken to this extreme that has all these stigmas around it. And
Hmm.
we really followed like the plant based. So I wanted to understand interesting ingredients, and it kind of provoked me to discover some that ended up creating some of my favorite recipes. So, like, I discovered this ingredient called nutritional yeast, which they refer to it in this book as fancy Cheeto dust. And that's exactly what it tastes like is Cheeto dust. And it's deactivated yeast. And
Yep.
oddly, it tastes like cheese. And so I put it randomly. I was messing around with recipes, um, and I didn't have any dairy, and I was actually trying to come up with a dairy-free sweet potato mash. And I was like, let me try this fucking Cheeto dust. Like that sounds awesome. Put it in there, and it was delicious. And it's one of my favorite recipes. It's so simple. It like takes sweet potato mash up a notch, and it's not, marshmallow, gooey, brown sugar, whatever people love to do to things. Like take a sweet vegetable and make it sweeter. No, this really highlights it. So, anyways, that book really stuck with me because it was fun.
Yeah. No, I love Thug Kitchen. I mean, they're was it like eat like you actually give a fuck?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
Yes,
great, and it is
and
so
that's
well written that
yeah,
you really get into it.
yeah. It is
Um,
fun. It's just like a fun read, and you're right. Like, and that's kind of what we were wanting to inspire people to do at Mud Hen was eat like you care about your body. Eat like this thing's gotta last. You know.
yeah. Um, well, and I mean, you mentioned inflammation too, and it's funny how much inflammation we battle on a daily basis without realizing it. I had to get into my
Mm-hmm.
40s before I realized what that word was, and how much it was breaking down my body. Uh, and before it was just like, hey, take some leave and keep going. But now it's like, oh God, I've got to do a whole diet to get rid of this. I can't just take a pill. Um,
Right? That's the thing because it's all inflammation's cumulative in the body. And so if you're not addressing it daily and you're continuing to consume inflammatory things, I mean, that was what ultimately happened to me, and kind of a health crisis that led me to my journey. Was like my body was screaming at me, and I was just trucking along, keep going, like, yeah, you're supposed to be in pain. That's how you know you're doing it right, you know? And my body just started saying no, no. And anyways,
No, I get it.
we
We
learned
went
some
through,
things.
yeah, I think we went through a very similar experience that kind of caused us to make some transitions. And
Hmm.
it was just long term stress, just developing health issues. That was essentially just the inflammation that your body stopped fighting it. It couldn't fight it anymore. Um, and until you found a way to kind of heal a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what
Like
was that for you?
they say it's
What was
like
your
a,
healing path?
well, yeah, I was gonna say this. It's like a filter. Like your filter just gets full of sludge, you know, and then can't take anymore. And mine was like kind of a, almost like a snap. Like I didn't realize truly the impact that mud had on me going into 2020. Like they said, I was just kind of on to the next thing. And then you're just taking hit after hit with that year of like open, close, pivot, pivot, like talk about moving just from an ego. Like you've got people asking you questions you don't know answers to, and
Oh God.
just kind of praying for it to be over. You know what I mean? Um, and it sort of broke me. Not sort of, it did. It broke me. Um, I just had this insurmountable amount of grief, and I had not a single minute to look at any of it. There's just no time when you're buried in work. And that's what kind of I was taught to do, was just bury myself in work. So I had to pull myself back and step back. Um, and once 2020 kind of slowed down, I found a little bit of space to find clarity around that. And once I started finding space and finding tools, I just hungered for more. So I went on a trip where I climbed up a mountain and screamed from the top that I was choosing me. And I meant it. And I came down and made plans to do that. I went to a yoga retreat and found some stillness and a job that seemed a whole lot better than what I'd been doing. And it was food adjacent, which felt safe to me. It was so scary to leave the industry, like so scary to walk away, but I knew I had to because it was consuming me. I mean, I was a shell of a person by the end of 2020.
Yeah, it wasn't consuming you. It had already consumed you.
Preach that. It had. Yeah, like I just was kind of going through the motions. You know, the like set it up, break it down, set it up, break it down
Hmm.
that you do. Like, and then you want to talk about having no purpose. You're setting it up to throw it in the trash, or setting it up to put it in a box you never wanted to serve your food in. Like, degrading. But that's
Oh,
what took
yeah.
me all the way to the depths of like, oh my God, I've got to change this. There has to be something else. There has to be sunlight. Like there used to be passion here, like I think all my passion was kind of sucked away. So going and working at a retreat center really helped me to find space and to be with the ingredients again and to really be with the process. Because as you step away into that chef and you start to pan out, like you get away from the food, you get away from the why. And especially when I was serving food that wasn't mine and I didn't have a lot of passion around it. And that can sound like it's from an ego place, but you are more driven when there's a certain buy-in, Um, so not having a lot of control is hard. But anyways, getting back to the ingredients was so important to me, and like falling in love with the process again
Right.
and slowing down and being like, oh yeah, this is why I started. That just really it it allowed me to unpack the mountains of grief that I needed to unpack.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of like you put it on your website. I'm looking at it. It's restart your spiritual journey, and kind of
Hmm.
the re part. I love how you do this. Is kind of in those quotes, or not quotes, parentheses or something.
Yeah.
Um, so it's whether it's your restart or it's a start. It was definitely a man, uh, just a complete reset.
Yeah. That's
You
kind of how
know,
I felt like everything, because everything kind of collapsed on me. I feel like I ended up going into this kind of cocoon. And so I was starting, but it was also like a reset because so much had ended in order to start. I think that's the poetic part is like every new beginning is another beginning's end. And I wouldn't be where I am, which I'm really excited about this new phase of my life. I wouldn't be where I am if it hadn't all kind of come to an end. So ultimately, I found gratitude for that, even though I was crushed by it when Mudhen closed, because I was left feeling like, well, what the fuck do I do now? Like, what do I do with my hands? I'm like, uh, what is my purpose?
I mean, absolutely. What is my purpose now? I mean, it's kind of sad that you have to ask yourself that question, but
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. It was is I mean, and it really sucked for me. Where married and two kids, and I walked away from it, and I mean, I went into this depression because I'm like, I have no purpose. And I'm like, oh, dude, you got this family. I mean, that's not purpose,
Mm.
But I mean, I was lost because I really was like, I don't know what to do. Um, but I think it wasn't just the because like you said, it consumes you. I was consumed, and it was the only thing I knew. It was, I mean, I've been in restaurants for my entire adult life, and it was also just because it was the only thing I knew.
Right. And that's what exactly. And like at that was one of the most valuable things I learned at my first retreat was like to be a human being, not a human doing. I was like, oh my God, I've just been doing and doing and doing. What does it mean to be? I think I shared with you, like the first time I ever had an afternoon to just sit in a hammock, I was like, here I am sitting in a hammock, sitting in a hammock, like doing that thing where you sit in a hammock. I had no idea how to just be, you know? And and then kind of taking away those labels, like again, who am I at my core? Like, why did I set out to express myself on a plate? What was that person really trying to say before I became my job, before I became chef, like before I had those titles and labels and became the doing, you
Hmm.
know? Because you're right, that's the person that has the purpose and the drive.
Yeah, and I mean, but like, yeah, we did talk about that hammock, and it's funny how it was very similar where you go from like being in control of the chaos and just the insanity and the pressure and feeding off of it.
Yes,
At least you thought you were feeding off of it. And, you know, turns out it was feeding off you.
exactly. The host
But
becomes the virus.
yeah. And then as soon as like all of a sudden it's quiet, you're just like, I mean, your mind doesn't stop. And
Oh,
so even though
yeah.
you're like, I get to just be, you're just still sitting there like, I mean, well, then I got to do this. I got to do this. I mean, I don't know how long it took me to really turn my brain off and actually relax and kind of reconnect.
Yeah, you're right. Like now that you're saying that, it was kind of a nervous system unwind. I think that's for me why yoga was so helpful. Like, and I really rediscovered my practice in 2020 because, and I was doing a practice called 26 and 2 that is the same sequence every day. It's the same 26 poses. And I needed that. I needed that consistency, that stability, and that stillness. And that was where I started to observe my thoughts and realize, like, oh my God, there's just shit flying around in there all day long. Like, Order this, don't forget that. You know how it is, like the things that you just keep in your head and you don't know how. Like
Yeah.
the to-do list and the thing and all the things that only chef knows. Like have to learn to set all that aside because your
Yeah,
mind
because
can just run
it was
rampant.
it was that internal timer that we used that
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't also telling us when that piece of fish was cooked without having to set a timer. You just knew, or going to the oven and just knowing that something is done because it's, you develop that internal timer, but that internal timer is also just pure anxiety in your head that is reminding you of all the shit you got to do on a daily basis to keep that restaurant running.
Yes. Yes. And then there's that crazy making time where you like, yeah, when I was just picturing like the moment when you think you have something in the oven and you don't. That's the crazy making thing. Like, is it an internal timer or am I just crazy? You know?
Yeah. No, I mean,
Keeping
it's
it all
funny how,
together.
yeah, some of that internal timer is still with me.
Yeah.
I surprise myself sometimes. Is it was funny how some things left me. Honestly, like my hands were the first thing I noticed when I was outside of the kitchen for a while. And it was just washing the dishes one day. And all of a sudden it was like, damn, this water's getting hotter. And it was like, no, nope. And then like another time I pulled a bagel out of the toaster, and I was putting some cream cheese or something on it for my daughter, and I was getting it ready. And I swear to God, I thought the bagel was going to burn a hole through my hand. And I was like, oh, I mean, I was just like, I'm weak again. You know?
That is hilarious. I have just started having that recently because I haven't been in kitchens as much this year. Even though I've been doing retreats, I haven't been on the chef side as much. So yeah, like I was just telling my boyfriend, I'm like, I'm pulling rotisserie chicken and crying like a little bitch. Like I'm just like, this is so hot. Like what happened to my asbestos fingers? So I just sat and held the chicken. I was like being stubborn, trying to open up the wound, you know? That
Yeah.
is so funny. This water's getting hotter.
Nope. Um, so yoga, that was your reset,
Yeah.
and it became your new path. So kind of tell
Yeah.
me about that.
I think, honestly, I think it sounds random or like, what? Yoga chef. But yoga is sort of like cooking in the sense that when you're really with it and you're like one with it, it's this dance and you can really go inward and find your own inner innate wisdom and just be with it and be with it's like that mind body connection that you
I can see
find
that.
in cooking, you also find in yoga. And yeah, I love it. I loved and it started out very much as a physical thing for me. I think a lot of people it starts that way. Like I said, I was always really active and God knows my body needed it. And I just really got into it. But through 2020 and up till now, I've really, really discovered the spiritual side of it. And it helped me find a bigger sense of purpose at a time when I needed it. And that can sound silly to someone who's like, isn't it just like contorting your body in weird shapes? But it's really not if you're in the practice, you know? Kind of like how cooking is like, aren't you just throwing ingredients in a skillet? Yeah, sure. Or you're learning and you're exploring and you're getting curious and you're mindful and you're present, you're using all your senses. It's the same thing.
Hmm. So your four dimension retreat, and on your Instagram, it's four dimensions wellness. Like, what are the four dimensions?
Four dimensions being um, spiritual, the mind, the body, and the social. Um, so spiritual is kind of your higher power or what's beyond you, however you perceive that. Um, Mind, obviously, being over the matter, and body being the physical part of wellness. And then social. I think we've all learned deeply over the last couple of years how much social connection is important. So that's what you get through joining around a table together all the way to retreats. Like that's what we really find at retreats is reconnecting with yourself and reconnecting with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like in our community, when I say our community, I'm not talking about the chef community. I'm just talking about the global community as a whole. The concept of social is, man, I don't want to say damaged, but it's not there anymore. I mean, in social media is not social. Sitting by
Mm-mm.
yourself in a corner on, going through and talking to people, that there's nothing social about that. I mean, social means one-on-one in person.
Yeah, really connecting, like
Yes.
being vulnerable. We are tactile beings too. I think we're communal beings. So there's something so isolating about so, social media and the poor use of that word.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's nothing social about social media.
yeah, and then it's like that false sense of I've seen my friends this week when I haven't, you know? So I think it almost discourages the connection that we all crave. I mean, I think so many of us were like little kids or like, whatever, when we were trapped inside and told we couldn't see our friends.
No, I mean, there's people, like, the body and the mind needs human interaction,
Hmm.
like true human interaction. I've always believed in that.
Totally.
Um, so you're also doing, I'm just taking a look here. So, I mean, yoga coaching, mentorship. I mean, what, tell me a little bit about those.
Yes. So I teach neurosomatic trauma informed yoga. So when you have traumatic experiences, those experiences can tend to get trapped in the body. And so through this practice, we use gentle techniques to help release that. Plus, it's just a really nice, gentle flow. So I really, really believe in the practice and love working one on one with people. That's when you can really have deep work and really deeply connect to yourself, and it's more tailored to you.
Sure.
Um, and I use all sorts of techniques like meditation and breath work and things like that to make it a really intuitive flow. Um, I do mentorship, which is like a container of sessions, like a committed container of sessions. So we'll work together for 6 to 8 weeks so you can really see the long term growth. I think kind of doing a one off here and there isn't as impactful as committing and going all in. And with that, I offer nourishment coaching. So, um, oftentimes at my retreats, I get asked for meal prep, but people kind of live far away. And so I can't really provide food to everyone that I meet, although I'd love to. Um, but I want to teach people how to do it. Food and caring for yourself is not only an act of self love, but it's a survival skill. And it's a survival skill that we've all gotten away from in terms of convenience and what we believe is a convenience in pricing. And often I don't think people realize that good food doesn't have to be expensive or put you out or be complicated. So I share um, my strategies and techniques of how I prepare food and menus for retreats and kind of help people design their weeks around healthful meals. And I share like my mud hen recipes and all of that too.
Fantastic. And then, so some of the, whether it's yoga coaching or the mentorship, I mean, do people need to be local in the DFW for that, or is that something you can do online?
No, I do a lot of it virtually, which is really great. Like I've definitely over the past couple of years seen the value of virtual and the impact. It might sound strange, like even when I started doing my first in 2020 is when I discovered virtual yoga because I didn't have a choice.
Yep.
And I thought it was weird at first, but once you get comfortable with it, I actually really enjoy it. And I enjoy being able, as a instructor, I enjoy being able to meet people where they are on their mat. Like I've had times when getting to a studio or getting somewhere just felt so daunting. It felt like this extra step. And I love the idea of, okay, just turn on your computer and there we are together, right where you feel comfortable, and it doesn't, rather than having travel time to a gym or a location, you get more time in the work. So a lot of it's done virtually, which is great.
How long until you're doing it in the VR world?
Oh my God, I don't know. Freaky, but I think that's coming. That's why I think there's so much value in us getting comfortable with this way of life.
Yeah, I think some of those headsets might need to get a little bit smaller before trying to do yoga with one of those things on your head.
Oh my God, that's quite paints quite the picture.
And then so events you talk about when you're doing your catered retreats. Um, you do those quite a bit. I mean, do you have those on the books coming up, or
Yeah, so I work with a couple properties and kind of do freelance work as a chef and then do some custom retreats. So I do anything from corporate retreats to bridal weekends or reunion weekends, that kind of custom stuff, and offer a lot. So we do workshops, custom menus, sound baths. I work with different practitioners to offer all kinds of things at our retreat. Like I've really been able to make some great connections and find, sound bath people, massage therapists, some great yoga instructors and meditation leaders that I work with. So you can really do a lot and have your own custom experience, which is really fun.
that's cool. So you mentioned this a few times. What is a sound bath?
Okay, so it's this really cool experience where all kinds of instruments are used. So it's like a meditative journey. So most often you'd be like in a yoga studio or a meditative space, and they'll set the mood, dim the lights and get it all cozy, and then use these bowls that are attuned to various. They're like glass bowls or sometimes metal bowls that are attuned to different sounds and take you on a meditative journey. So the sound vibrations can help clear your energy and help you go into deep relaxation and meditation. So you can have some deep visualizations, all kinds of things can happen. It's a really neat experience.
Hmm. Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, I do remember seeing that, and I don't remember where, but that's
Yeah,
interesting.
they've
So
gained popularity, interestingly.
so when it comes to yoga or being involved with you, like, I mean, what? I mean, obviously, reach out to you through your website or through social media, Instagram and Facebook. Um, but how, like someone like me, middle aged 40-year-old guy, probably needs to be doing some of this stuff or making more of a commitment to it. Like, where do you get started?
That is what I love about one-on-one client work. I think some people are so intimidated by yoga. Like I've heard people say, "Oh, I'm not flexible," which is ironic
I'm
because
not.
do more, but do more then. Like um, I saw a yoga instructor that said that's like saying I'm too dirty to take a shower. Like you're the one that needs it if you're not flexible. So that's what I love about the one-on-one work is I get to meet you where you're at. So it takes the intimidation piece of walking into a studio where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the only one that doesn't know what these words they're saying are and who can't touch my toes. Like it takes all of that intimidation out of it and you get to just learn and play. That's all yoga is learning to touch your toes like a kid again.
Probably a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is great. We'll definitely have to put that out there and share it with our audience as well. Um, and I love how there's more and more people that are getting more into the mental health side of things and refocusing their mind, body, and spirit in so many ways. Where I mean, man, almost pre-COVID, really, COVID was the way for so many of us to kind of find that require that reset and get there. But thinking about it, our parents' generation, where if they went through what we went through um, with just COVID, and because the mindset was if you ever felt how we did, that broken or that burned out, just mentally and physically just done, in being able to transition to something healthier, that in reclaiming your life was considered weakness. Um, but
Right.
now it's considered strength. I mean, so it's a beautiful thing. And if you haven't taken a look at it or known about it, and I found this on another show that I was listening to. It's called the Burnt Chef Foundation. It's based out of the UK, and it's all about just bringing all that back and kind of bringing it to the forefront of the industry. And they're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and a lot of it's all free. It's free education, helplines. We almost need something more like that here in the U.S. But for now, it's definitely a great resource.
At least someone's doing it. Okay, I'll check that out. That's awesome.
Well, Chef, I really appreciate your time. I know time is important to a lot of us, and look forward to sharing your story with everybody pretty soon.
Thank you. This has been an honor. I've enjoyed chatting with you this morning.
And thanks for listening to this episode of Inside the Pressure Cooker. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you on how we're doing. And lastly, if you'd like to be on the show, go to insidethepressurecooker.com and fill out the form. It'll tell me a little bit about you, some of your story, and how it applies to the show. We'd love to hear from you and love to have you on the show.